Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks ever so much for tuning into today's From Talk to Action series. My name is Toby Milden, and today's topic, we're talking about building trust and psychological safety within the workplace so that you've got a thriving workforce. Our mission for these webinars, so we deliver these webinars every fortnight, it's to help people feel like they belong in the workplace that they work in, to give them the resources that they need in order to thrive so that you can get better results as a team and as an organization. I just want to share some house rules with you just to get going. This is a learning webinar, so just please refrain from pitching or selling anything. I know that I run my own consultancy company and I won't be pitching or selling anything to you either. It's purely, we're purely here for learning and development. We are recording the session today because there are a number of people that are unable to join us. So we do make it available for people to be able to catch up afterwards on YouTube. So please refrain from sharing anything that is commercially sensitive because this recording will be in the public domain. I do want to make this interactive. So if you do have any questions or you want to contribute any thoughts or ideas, please use the virtual hand button on Zoom just to raise your virtual hand. And then I can come to you and take your question or comment. It's perfectly okay to get things wrong. We are here to learn and grow and develop. I've been working in the field of EDI since about 2014, and I still put my foot in it sometimes. But we just have to have that kind of mindset that it's okay to get things wrong as long as we learn and grow from the experience. And we're here to just listen to one another and to kind of show respect to one another as well. So those are just some of the kind of housekeeping ground rules. So the order of today's webinar is that if you haven't done so already, please use this as an opportunity to introduce yourself in the chat. So just let us know who you are, what your role is, where you work. If you do want to connect with other people on today's call, please drop in your LinkedIn URL so that people can follow up with you afterwards. It's always good to make new connections as well. I'll go through today's topic in about 15 or 20 minutes, which is around developing trust and psychological safety within your teams. Then we'll have some breakout discussions. We'll then reconvene and just have a wider chat. And then we'll kind of have a Ask Me Anything session. And then I'll just give you details of the next session that I'll be running in a fortnight. So let's just dive straight into the content. This pyramid here was developed by Patrick Lencioni. He wrote a really great book that I would highly recommend you reading called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And his book is generally around how you develop high-performing teams. But it's very useful when we're talking about developing equity, diversity, and inclusion within a team or an organization. And I'm just going to focus on the bottom two foundational levels. So what he says, first of all, is that we need to have a foundation of trust. We need to develop that psychological safety. Now, if you haven't come across psychological safety before, what psychological safety means is people's ability to feel like they can speak up without any fear of backlash or retribution. So they're able to raise concerns without any fear of backlash. They're able to share their ideas or innovative suggestions with you without feeling like their ideas are going to be shut down or discarded with. So we need to develop, if we're going to have a high performing team, like what we have to do first of all is make sure that we're developing this trust and psychological safety within our team. If we don't have that, then we've got colleagues who are very guarded with one another. They don't open up, they don't share their concerns or their ideas with you, which can lead to problems further down the line. So I was talking to a head of HR who works for a aircraft components manufacturing company. And she told me that psychological safety was really important for them because if somebody on the factory floor notices that something is going wrong in the production of aircraft parts, then they need to flag that as quickly as possible to the right people, because what they don't want is faulty components ending up on aircrafts. And therefore, in her words, she said, we don't want aeroplanes falling out of the sky. They've got a duty of care to communities to make sure that aircrafts fly safely. So that's why psychological safety was important to them. And then with that psychological safety, where you have a high degree of trust, you end up with a high performing team that are very open with one another, and they can share their thoughts and feelings and concerns and ideas with one another. The next level on the pyramid is around conflict. Now, badly performing teams will avoid healthy conflict. They will brush things under the carpet. They will avoid challenging one another directly. And therefore, in a low performing team, that starts to build up resentment within teams and amongst colleagues. Whereas high performing teams are very candid with one another. And what I mean by candidness is that they, with care, they will challenge each other. They will challenge ideas. They will air issues, and they will want to challenge each other directly. So they don't tend to brush things under the carpet. Now, when we talk about this model from an EDI perspective, we really should be focusing on these bottom two levels specifically around making sure that we're developing trust and that psychological safety, and that we're helping teams be candid with one another so that they can have those kind of radical conversations. That then supports the other three levels of the pyramid that we won't be covering today, but we will probably cover in another webinar, which is around making sure that you have commitments of a team, that you hold each other accountable, and that the whole team is focused on results. So when it comes to developing this psychological safety, I really like the work of Brené Brown, who's a social psychologist or researcher based over in the States. She's done some really good TED Talks that I would highly recommend watching. But she talks about the need to create safe spaces, and this might be something you've heard of talking a lot. When we talk about EDI, we do talk about creating safe spaces. And this is about making sure that people feel safe to contribute. So safe spaces are about, creating that environment where people feel that they can speak up, that they can share ideas without any fear of retribution or backlash. So that is really about developing that psychological safety. But she says that we actually need to go one step further. We need to create brave spaces, because the thing is, creating safe spaces might not feel safe for everybody. So if imagine you've got a team of people that's quite homogenous. So imagine you've got a team of people that are predominantly white and male and straight. What will feel safe for them won't feel safe for somebody who feels like they don't fit into the in-group, because we know from our unconscious biases, we have a similarity bias. We tend to create in-groups and out-groups in our other than conscious self. And we over appreciate the skills and abilities of people within our in-group. And then we tend to undermine or overlook the skills and abilities and experiences of people in the out-group. So if you are at work and you feel like you're not as part of the in-group, then a safe space that's been designed by the in-group might not feel safe for you. So leaders really should be thinking about, how do we create these brave spaces layered on top of these safe spaces? And what I mean by brave spaces is where we can have those awkward, difficult, profound conversations. How do we get comfortable with the uncomfortableness? How do we have those awkward conversations about things like race or disability or misogyny within the workplace so that we can start to really air these topics and get them out into the foreground. So as a leader, think about, okay, yes, I'm focusing on creating the safe space where people feel safe to speak up, but then actually how do we have more deeper, profound conversations where we can have those braver conversations? So that's the kind of the key content that I've covered for today. So I've talked about Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, particularly around how do we create that level of trust? How do we create those kind of candid conversations so that we can have constructive conflict in the organization? And then I've also talked about the difference around creating safe and brave spaces. So we're going to go into breakout groups now for about 10 minutes. And in your breakout groups, what I'd like you to do is just discuss this question amongst yourselves. So can you share an example in your organization of a time when your team has built trust or psychological safety well? What did you do and what difference did it make? So how have you managed to develop psychological safety or trust in your teams? Um, what did you do? And what 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 impact did that have? Because sharing this best practice and knowledge with people in your breakout room is going to be inspirational to them if they're struggling to sort of develop that psychological safety. So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms in a sec. Um, if you've got any problems, you can always return to this main forum. I'll be here in the main forum for you, but I will see you in about 10 minutes. If you could discuss this with your colleagues in the call. So just bear with me a sec while I set up the room. Yeah, a couple of rooms, 3 or 4 people per room. Let me just set up the room. And yeah, I will see you in 10 minutes. And then we'll open it up for a wider discussion. All right, see you in a sec. Cool. Okay, so we're back in the main forum now. So hopefully you had some interesting conversations in your breakout groups. Um, so let's just open this up for general discussion. What did you learn from your breakout groups? What have other organizations done, or what have you done to build trust and psychological safety in your teams, and what has worked? What kind of impact has it made? So just unmute yourself and share your thoughts with us.
Yeah, happy to go.
Yeah, please. Hi,
Um,
Estelle. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, sorry, we had a little bit of sound issues, so we were just actually just typing into the chat box. But one thing that I shared that we tend to do in our organization, but also I try to kind of like I guess like role model this, but at the beginning of like every project, whether it's like a new team or like an engagement lead, we always have like a kind of ways of working session. So we just kind of have a chat through and like agree on the way that we kind of like want to work with one another. So just trying to understand people's working styles as well.
Yeah,
But then one thing that I always need to make sure that I do is like ask people what their stress behaviors are and obviously share my own. Um, so I would say like when I'm stressed, this how it like how I show up and like how that differs to when I'm like really, really engaged or like I'm really, really happy, not stressed.
yeah,
So like I'm a lot quieter. I might not be as like sort of like chatty or bubbly or whatever it is. And it just makes it a lot easier to have that conversation when the stress does pop up down the line. Um,
yeah,
you don't have to feel uncomfortable to say like, oh, by the way, guys, you might have noticed, or you might not have noticed actually, but I'm really, really stressed just now.
yeah,
Um, and sometimes like it saves you even having to raise that. People can spot it and then they can kind of pull you aside and say, is everything okay? What can we do to
mm,
support? But that just kind of like eases, it's a lot easier to talk about your stress behaviors and how you are when you're not in that zone.
okay. I like that a lot. I think that's brilliant. Yeah. One thing you might want to look into, there's this really cool website. It's called the Manual of Me. Um, and what you do is basically you create like an online profile about you and how you like to work and what your preferences are. I think it's free up to a point, but then if you want to use some of the more advanced features, you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a really good website, and what you can do is you could create like a question in there about the what are your stress behaviors,
Yeah.
and then save that as a template. So yeah, that's
Perfect.
really good.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
sharing that, Still. Thanks.
Cheers. Thank
Thank you. Anyone else? Have you got any kind of cool ways that you've managed to build trust and psychological safety in your teams, or have those radically candid conversations with one another?
Hi, Toby. What we spoke about in our group was slightly different to Estelle's group by the sounds of things. And we spoke a little bit about leaders being really vulnerable. So
Mhm.
people
Yes.
explaining a little bit, I mean, not to the level in terms of, individually, but in terms of the projects, the things they've worked on. So what my organization has done well recently is that we have tried to create a psychologically safe place by linking behaviors to company values. So there was a lot of work done on the values of the company to try and show people that we would be expectant for people to speak up if they felt that they were either in an unsafe situation, whether that's psychologically or otherwise, and
Mhm.
we would expect them as part of their role, so not on their job description, but a really an integral part of the way in which the company operates, for them to speak up. So it's almost like they are empowered and expected to do that. Now that's easy
Okay.
said than done if we're saying to people, well, we want you to speak up, but then people don't.
Mm.
So that was rolled out by our senior leadership team, who have walked the shoes of many of the people in the organization, but with a real vulnerability. So not
Mm.
this is the executive team saying a certain thing, this is, Joe Blogs talking about their personal experience, and just trying to make it so that it was a little bit more open for people to discuss. So
Yeah.
just hearts and minds rather than, book smart, was
Yeah.
is kind of how what's worked for us recently. Still a work in progress, but we're getting there.
Yeah. And which organizational value speaks to that vulnerability? Like, how's it written down?
So in my organisation, we've got three: it's safety, respect, and integrity. And what we've
Okay.
tried to do is each department will say what those values mean to them. So it's not just about this is the company values. So from a HR, I kind of lead up the HR function. So what we've said from a safety point of view is very different to what the guys offshore will say from a safety point of view. So for them, it's all about process. It's all about, making sure procedures are followed. Whereas
Yeah.
for us, it's trying to ensure that people do feel safe to speak up. We link that with respect by trying to then create an environment where people are respected regardless of their background. All of those things. So it's integral. We had a bit of a giggle in terms of the way in which our department looks at it versus the way in which maybe the IS team will look at it, because respect for them might be around making sure that the data is GDPR type stuff from a data conflict point of
Yeah.
view, whereas for us it means something very different. But sharing across the business, this is what it means to us, getting them put on posters on your wall and basically saying you can hold me to account to these values, because as part of
Yeah.
this organization, that's what I'm here for. And then if people still feel uncomfortable, then we need to have a look at attitudes and behaviors of the leadership team that are around them. But we're not afraid to have those conversations.
That's really good. I love how the three values, they're simple, which is good. And how you're then localizing it for different teams and making it personal to them. I can imagine that process will help them stick in the long run. It's funny how, like, organizations, we need to find ways of making sure that we are walking the talk and that we are living and breathing our values. So I'll just tell you a funny story, kind of a sidebar. I went to go and do some just general diversity and inclusion training to a big company, which I won't name. And as I went into the reception area, behind the reception desk was the list of their organizational values. And something like we respect one another, or we value diversity, was at the top of this list of values. And I thought, oh, brilliant, we're off to a great start. Diversity and inclusion is listed as their number one value. And then when I got into the training session, everyone came in and they looked grumpy. They sat down, they had very closed body language. They sat with their arms folded. They weren't engaging in the training material at all. And I had to stop the training and say, like, is everyone in the right training course? Because this is a workshop around diversity and inclusion. And they were like, yeah, I don't know why we're here. It's mandatory training, but the senior leadership team don't give a crap about diversity and inclusion. They don't walk the talk. They don't behave in a respectful or inclusive way. And I just thought that was really interesting, because clearly the organization didn't find a way of being able to role model the value of diversity and inclusion, which was clearly listed on the wall of the lobby in reception. So yeah, any way that organizations can find, like Donna, like you're doing, like, how do you actually make sure that teams role model and live and breathe the values of the organization is critical. And that in itself will help build trust. Because if you look up at the organization and senior leaders are not sticking to the values, it's like, well, they're giving you unwritten permission to also do the same. So they're also saying to you, for example, it's okay to behave in an unsafe manner. It's okay to disrespect one another, because I'm getting away with it. So you can get away with it as well. Yeah, brilliant. Anybody else on today's call? Any kind of thoughts that you had from your breakout conversations? Just unmute yourself and share. Don't worry if you don't have any further thoughts. It's okay. It's okay. Um, so just if you are interested, you can book in a half an hour phone call with me if you would like to just have a bit of a sounding board. If you just want half an hour to kind of reflect on what we've talked about today in a one-to-one session with me. It's completely free, by the way. This is just if you want the opportunity just to kind of throw around ideas, get a bit of a sounding board on how you can develop trust and psychological safety and have that kind of candidness in teams in your organization. So if that is useful for you, I'll just drop in the chat box a link to my calendar. So all you need to do is just click on that link in the chat, and then you can just pick a time in the next couple of weeks to have a conversation with me, and we can just talk about basically what you've learned on today's webinar and how you can apply what you've learned today to your own organization. Every organization is unique and different. You've got your own culture, your own challenges, your own limitations, your own opportunities. So we just need to take today's content and just think about how it actually gets applied to your organization in the real world. It's only a quick call. It's 25 minutes, so it doesn't take up a lot of your time. I know everyone's really stretched and busy at the moment, but if you need a sounding board and chuck around ideas, I'm available to do that with you. So before we sign off today's meeting, does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask me about today's content or anything else around EDI?
All good. Thank you very much, Toby.
That's all right. I'm available on email if you want to get me afterwards, or like I say, just if you want to just have a one-to-one conversation, just book time in my diary. Before we go, the next subject in a fortnight is called Beyond HR, Making EDI a Business Imperative for Senior Leaders. So this is all about how you make sure that EDI is seen as strategically important to the organization, how you get senior leaders on board, so it's not just seen as the HR department's initiative or a box ticking initiative. It's seen as crucial to the success and growth of your organization. So feel free to come along to that session in a fortnight. If you have registered for this webinar, then you are automatically registered for the next one. If you are watching this as a catch-up, you will need to register for the webinar on Zoom. I will put a link for you to be able to register in the description of the video below so that you can easily register and then you can access that. Thanks ever so much for tuning in today. Hopefully today's topic has been interesting and useful for you and has given you some practical things to start implementing in your organization. And I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar in a fortnight. Thanks very much for joining.
Thank you, Toby.
Thanks, Toby. Thanks all.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.